tell I'm getting ready for spring because I want to talk about golf. Yeah, I am ready. The problem I have with golf as a sport is that it is mysterious and very subtle. Throughout my life and throughout high school and college, I played field hockey. And I know, and I knew, that in order to be the best in field hockey, I had to go into the gym, I had to run farther and harder, I had to practice more, and the more that I followed these rules, the better I was going to be as a player. But golf is not like that. It doesn't seem to follow the rules. One of my first things here at St. Margaret's was that I was on the St. Margaret's team for the Bishop's golf tournament. And it quickly was understood that I was in charge of putting, because that was about as far as I could go. So, first hole, I line it up. I got about 3 feet between the ball and the hole. Easy peasy, not a problem. So I hit it. It went sailing over the hill, over the hole, off the green, over a sand trap, and into the woods. Clearly, golf is not the same sport as field hockey. There is something mysterious about golf, called gentleness, subtleness. I don't know what it is, but I need to continue to work with it. This morning, Moses makes this great equation of Christianity in the world. Moses is doing one of his farewell speeches. He seems to dive through the entire book of Deuteronomy. And he's saying to the Israelites, remember, the law that I received on the mountaintop and gave to you is the law and the key to getting into the promised land and milk and honey. It is very simple, says Moses. Follow the law, follow the commandments, follow the ordinances, and if you do, then you will have the promised land and milk and honey. If you don't follow the commandments to the letter, if you don't follow the ordinances to the letter, if you don't follow the commandments and everything to the letter, no promised land, no milk and honey, nothing. You will die. And your family will die and everything else. And we get no consolation from Jesus in the gospel, because Jesus says, not only do we have to follow the commandments and the laws and the ordinances, not only do we have to do everything right, but then we also have to be careful what we do in our heart and in our mind and in our lips. We can't look at somebody else without committing adultery. We can't yell out expletives. We can't even think the thoughts. Or, no promised land, no salvation, no milk and honey. Somehow or another, we are asked to follow that equation. And even so, like an algebra equation, we now have a lot of few more things that we have to include before A, B, and C equals D. Easy peasy, not a problem. So we just do that, right? A and B and C and then D and then equals and promised land, here I come. Am I going to see you there? Or are you going to be like I am, and somehow or another, that equation does not work? A never quite ends up to be A. B, oh, the laws and the commandments and the ordinances. C, and I'm always swearing, I'm always thinking bad thoughts on the highway. I just can't seem to do it. Regardless of how I try to follow the law and everything, there is something that is way out of my control. I tried to be the best parent. I read Spot. I read Brazelton. And yet, my children don't seem to be doing the same things I want them to do. I try to follow the laws and the commandments. But I tell you, that person cuts me off on the highway, and my mouth is out there. Yeah, try driving carpool with 10 kids in the back, and all of a sudden somebody cuts you off, and you're yelling at this guy, and all of a sudden you know they're going to get home and say, Mommy, Mommy, guess what Mrs. Hague said? I just, somehow or another, as much as I keep trying, it just doesn't, I can't do it. My sister, even though she does everything that she's supposed to be doing, nutrition-wise, exercising, she still has osteoarthritis. It's not fair. She's done the whole thing she's supposed to do. And yet now she has to worry that if she walks out, she's going to fall and break something. And she's only 58. It's not fair. Were Moses and Jesus lying to us? We were told that if we follow the commandment, we'd have milk and honey for breakfast. It's amazing that today is Celtic Sunday. In the 20th century, and thanks be to God in the 21st century, we are rediscovering the Celtic theology of not only the Anglican and the British and the Christians, but the idea that there is some kind of joy in life. In 664, there was a conference at the Abbey of Whitby, where the king of Northumbria, Osweg, brought together the Celtics and those from Canterbury, because they were arguing and fighting amongst them. And the king thought, I can't have these Christians fighting each other. So he brought them together. And in the Abbey, the Celtics sat on one side, and the Canterburyans sat on the other. And they argued for days. Now, on the Celtic side, you had this idea of spirit. You had this tradition of stemming, really, from St. John the Evangelist, St. John the Beloved One, who leaned against God, leaned against Jesus and listened to the heartbeat of God. Aidan of Lindisfarne, St. Columba of Iona, they incorporated the Celtic spirituality into their own prayers, into their own theology. They believed in listening to God, praying always. Now on the other side, you have those from Canterbury, known as the Roman contingent. They believed in St. Augustine and his theology. That theology is that we are born evil. We are born bad. And in order to get into God's good graces, we need to follow all the commandments, all the law, all the ordinances, behave ourselves, and we will work our way up the food chain to the land of paradise. We will earn it, in essence. I'm making this all too simple, but that was sort of basically what they believed. Clearly, the two of them couldn't quite compromise enough. You have those that believe that we should follow the law, that we were born evil, that our promised land is if we obey. And those that believed that there was a spirituality, there was a sense of earthiness, there was a sense of joy in this world, that we were in essence born good. And therefore our lives were kind of a partnership and companionship, walking with God. Well, the king settled with Canterbury. And then the Celtics began to disappear. And the Romans, if nothing else, symbolically built their churches out of stone. The Celts, their churches were of wood and moss and anything else that they could find, but nothing permanent. And that's why we have all these churches. What we have discovered, thanks be to God, is a combination of both. We understand that we do have to follow some rules. I have to learn how to drive the speed limit. That's the rules. I can see how it is easier in my faith to say, all right, I'm going to follow the rules and therefore I'm going to get to God. As opposed to, I'm going to follow the rules, but there's a nuance and a subtleness like golf that somehow or another I don't quite understand, and so therefore it's not as straight a path. It's not a good equation as far as mathematics goes. There's some nuances, some variables in there in the Celtic theology that leave me a little uncomfortable and maybe a little bit more needing God. Because what we have discovered is that God did not just give Moses and then the Israelites and then to us these rules, these laws, these ordinances, these commandments and say, have at it, I'll see you at the finish line. Because we have discovered, and I think that's what Jesus knew, that he upped the ante to the point where he knew, as a human, we cannot do it on our own. We are not in control of this world. We are not in control of that which we have in everything. I'm not in control of my children. My sister is certainly not in control of her osteoarthritis. There are things that we just have to let go of. Think of that speed skater, that woman in the finals who's racing around. She wasn't even supposed to be in the finals, and she was in third place, and all of a sudden somebody wipes her out. And she's up against the bumpers, watching as everybody else continues the race. Now, is that fair? She followed the rules. She followed all the things. She was at the track. She was lifting weights for probably her entire life. Sometimes there are things that are just we cannot control, and that's when we need God. I'm going to side with the Celtics on this one, because I know that there are things in my life that I need God's help with. I don't need the coach yelling from the mountaintop saying, you better do this or you better get out. I need somebody who's racing next to me. I need Jesus who kept saying, keep going, keep going, keep going. I need a coach who is there with an extra ski pole for me when mine breaks. I need a coach who is there with an extra ski pole when my competitor breaks, so that it is an even competition. I need someone who is with me, who is helping me to say, next time, think again before you say that word. Next time, be more careful. Or next time, just understand that there are things in your life that you have no power over, no control over. But when that happens to you, know that I am with you. Our lives are not like my field hockey playing. Our lives are much more mysterious and subtle. And isn't it much more joyful that way? Isn't it an understanding that I'm going to keep trying, But there is joy somewhere in this. Thanks be to God that the milk and honey comes before the end line. Thanks be to God that the promised land is the journey, not the end. Thanks be to God. Amen.